Trigger warning. Viewing the following content may cause intellectual strain and swelling of logical capacity. If you suffer from perpetual rectal discomfort, viewer discretion is advised.
Women were in the workforce for a long time before the civil rights movement. Rosie the Riveter is a perfect example.
Rosie the Riveter is an allegorical cultural icon in the United States who represents the women who worked in factories and shipyards during World War II, many of whom produced munitions and war supplies. These women sometimes took entirely new jobs, replacing the male workers who joined the military. She is widely recognized in the "We Can Do It" poster as a symbol of American feminism and women's economic advantage. Similar images of women war workers appeared in other countries such as Britain and Australia. The idea of Rosie the Riveter originated in a song written in 1942 by Red Evans and John Jacob Loeb. Images of women workers were widespread in the media in formats such as government posters, and commercial advertising was heavily used by the government to encourage women to volunteer for wartime service in factories. Rosie the Riveter became the subject and title of a Hollywood film in 1944.
Rosie the Riveter is a perfect example, where a lot of the men went to war in World War II, and it was women that made up the majority of the people that were working because most of the men were gone. And the funny thing is that when the men came back from war, the women who wanted to continue working continued working. But the overwhelming majority of the women said, no, I want to go home. And that's okay. And that's what feminism is supposed to be, right? Equal rights, where you as an individual have the freedom to choose the path that you want to choose. That's the idea. That's the concept. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I think like all other concepts, and right now I'm going to share an article that I think did a fantastic job of really articulating exactly what it was that I wanted to say. It's in a magazine called Evie. I will readily acknowledge that Evie is not what one would consider a left-wing publication. Depending on which fact-checking website you go to, Evie is either a leaning right publication or an extreme right publication. So I guess it depends on who owns the fact checkers.
Yeah.
But the one thing that stood out to me, and the one thing that I've never understood why nobody got this or why nobody makes a big deal about this, the Green New, not the Green New Deal, the New Deal basically created the social state, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That was government spending on a level that prior to that was never even imagined. Right? For government to fund that properly, they needed to increase the tax base. Now, coincidentally, and this is the part that I find truly amusing, coincidentally, at the same time, guess what was happening? The push to give women equal rights. And equal rights in the sense that women should be able to go to work and pay taxes. Now, this article here specifically highlights something that I've always suspected, but I've never really found a way to totally articulate. And I'll just read it here real quickly. It says, the Marxist roots of feminism. Feminist and socialist ideologies share many similarities. Socialism, with its original focus on worker rights, concentrated on the conflict between oppressor and oppressed, as it pertained to the upper and lower economic classes in society. Feminism uses the same dichotomy, but instead of oppressor and oppressed being seen from the economic standpoint, it's seen from the perspective of gender. Both Marxism and feminism are ideological perspectives pertaining to power in society, who has it, and its rightful distribution. The haves and have-nots became the masculine and the feminine. Both ideologies seek the same end via leveling natural differences of competence, skill, ambition, ability, and economic or genetic inheritance in the pursuit of equality. They claim that meritocracy is flawed, that the natural order was rigged, and that by lifting the weak up and keeping the strong down, everyone would be freer. Of course, the opposite is true. Now, this is a way of basically saying that, you know, as with most progressive ideas, they all stem from, and this goes back to the reference of intersectional feminism.
Mm-hmm.
They all stem from this idea that everything in life can be viewed from the lens of being a victim or being the victor, being the oppressor or being the oppressed.
Yeah.
That's why they currently have the oppression Olympics, where the more oppression points you have, the better your chances of winning the game. In other words, if you're handicapped, that gets you a certain point. If you're of certain race, that gives you more points.
Mm-hmm.
If you're part of the alphabet soup, that gives you extra points. Right? Depending on whatever your check boxes are on the chart of oppression, the
Yeah.
more check boxes you have, the more oppressed you are, and the more you benefit from the programs that are being pushed in society to make everything fair and even.
Yeah, it's pretty much who can play the best victim, who's been hurt the most by the system.
And that's not to say that there aren't genuine people who have been hurt,
Yeah.
right? Because obviously, again, I'll reiterate something I've said on a couple of episodes. Every conversation has to be largely rooted in generalities.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we are speaking about specific people by name, you're going to be having conversations based on generalities, and every generality is going to have its exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
That is acknowledged, that's understood. Exceptions, however, do not make the rule. The rule is the rule, and the exceptions are what they are. They are the rare cases. They are the minority of cases. They are by far not a majority or anywhere near a majority of the situations in that particular conversation or whatever the circumstances are that we're talking about. And in this case, this idea of oppressor and oppressed, a great example would be what happened with the Supreme Court and throwing out the affirmative action.
Mm-hmm.
Asian people were being actively oppressed, being required to have about 235 more points on the SAT
Yeah.
to be admitted to Harvard in order to allow less qualified black people admission.
Which is ridiculous. And if you guys do want to hear more about that, we have that in a other video. You can go check that out. But yeah, it was very just appalling to see how they were, they have black people play the victim when there are, people who are actually being treated unequally, such as Asians, and it was very messed up. That's the double standard was ridiculous.
Yeah, and it goes further than that, right? Again, going back to Marxism, the article does make it a point to kind of note it's certainly not a conspiracy to believe in the connection between women's empowerment narratives and Marxist ideology. Lenin, okay, he was the Russian guy I told you about,
Yeah.
was open about his mission to destroy the nuclear family by pushing women into the workforce. You see, to a communist, a woman who was spending her time taking care of her husband and children was a waste of a good worker who could be put to use for Mother Russia. In fact, the equal pay for equal work slogan of today's feminists was officially legislated for the first time by Lenin's Bolshevik government. By pushing women out of the home, Marxists were able to achieve two goals at once. They destroyed the biologically strong glue of the nuclear family while doubling their workforce. And then they further go on in the article to highlight the connection between feminism and taxes. And the one thing that really stood out to me in this portion was nothing is supported by the state that doesn't directly benefit the state. The federal government's main objective is to continually establish and expand its power and dominion over the public. Feminism furthers this aim by incentivizing and persuading women to leave the home to work. Instead of raising their children and playing an active role in their education, religious upbringing, these roles are now outsourced, paid for, and taxed by a mother's income. In recognition of that, the closing thoughts of this article, I think, knock it out of the park, right? The author, G.K. Chesterton, once said, feminism is a muddled idea that women are free when they serve their employers, but slaves when they help their husbands.
Yeah.
That's like, that says it all, man.